Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
Okay, it's 5:34, so let's call the meeting to order, please. Can I get Megan to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
We always do just, as we mentioned right before, if I get an update on that one employee thing, that we want me to update it at some point,
Okay, well, we would update that in executive session, so we've got executive session if needed, so
Okay.
I will put a question mark there and
thank you,
employee, and you can let us know when we get to that point.
thank you very much.
You're welcome. I would like to add committee appointments. And where would my board members like that added? We could add it either at the beginning after communications and public comments, or we can add it as finished business, new business.
Put it after minutes.
After the,
Yeah,
right after the minutes?
yeah, that's fine.
All right, so we'll do a 5A. Is there anything else?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Communications and public comment. Do you have anything on there, Wimpy?
No.
Okay, I would like to read a thank you letter to the board from Deb. It says, "Dear board members, thank you for the kind words that were spoken to me upon the presentation. I've always felt blessed to have had a job that I loved and to have been fortunate to have worked with colleagues and professionals that were kind, caring, and dedicated to EFMS students and staff. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. Thank you, Bev." And the card says, "This comes to let you know just how much I appreciate your kindness and your special thoughtfulness, Bev." You guys can look at that if you want. Okay, if public comment,
I'll try and keep it brief and focused on one issue, but I have several things I want to discuss. To give you a little background, this all starts with, I have a child,
can I interrupt you? Would you give your name, please?
Patrick Applegate.
Yeah, for sure, Patrick. Thank you, Patrick. Sorry. Go ahead.
All right, I have a child in Central Elementary School. I have two in the middle school and I have one in the high school. This is going to be around my child in Central Elementary School. Within about a week of school starting, she came across another kid, so she had to go home for 2 weeks, and she was quarantined. Everything was fine. She never was positive or anything. I was back to school, and some of the rules had changed while she was gone. So I don't know exactly when. And I only found out because I speak to my child on a regular basis to find out what's going on. This is the only reason I know this. I'll share it with you. It's my position that Central Elementary School is not in compliance with the board rules that were adopted for masking guidelines. It says very clearly in the state guidelines and everything adopted that there's no mask to be worn outside. There are masks being worn outside. Now, I know there's a procedure that if somebody wants to change the masking guidelines, there's a procedure that needs to be followed. I'm not made aware of any procedure or anything being brought through that would change this. Like I said, the only reason I even know any of this is because I asked my child. It all kind of centers around the wearing a mask outside during recess. It's my understanding that it's 100%, other than perhaps first grade students are the only ones that don't have to. But as far as I know from speaking to many people, is that it's 100% masking guidelines outside during recess for the elementary school kids. One thing I would like to do is to the best of my ability, come up with a transcript of last meeting. And I want to go over this because there's a discrepancy, and I think it needs attention and it needs to be resolved, and I would like to get the bottom of it as we continue on this issue. And then this starts at 113 of timestamp for the last meeting, and starts with board chair. I'm just going to use titles because we don't really know each other that well. The board chair says, because they have to keep masks on inside, how's it going providing breaks? I'm assuming that state guidelines don't require masks outside. They're not required to wear them outside. How's that going? Principal of Central Elementary. We have typical breakfast, lunch, and snack breaks. There have been some cases on the playground where it's tight and they're closer than 3 feet on the playground. We've had some instances where students have to wear masks because they choose, this is important, because they choose to play on the structure that you can't play safely on if you're not masked. It's because they're closer than 3 feet apart. On the playground, there's a wheel rotation piece and things, so in order for them to be able to play on it, they're required to wear masks. Board chair. I thought outside, anytime they're outside, they don't have to be masked. Principal of Central Elementary. Well, we're getting mixed reports. Pay attention to this because I'm going to come back to this later. We're getting mixed reports from the nurses as well because they're getting a lot of COVID cases that are coming from outdoor activities. And so we're getting a little pushback on that from the nurses too. And appropriately, because we were trying to figure out what exactly the contacts are coming from, essentially the cases aren't coming from schools, but the contacts themselves are coming from potentially outdoor activities. So the guidance may or may not be protecting those places. So it may be that there are cases where the meeting indoors, but there are also outdoor activities. Just to put that to rest, the next day, Vermont Secretary of Education, Dan French, in his weekly Vermont COVID press briefing, notified everybody during that meeting that there are no longer contact tracing outdoors because it's not an issue. There's no issue with outdoor COVID. They're not even tracking people anymore, other than obviously the bus, which he mentioned. So that whole paragraph, that there may be some cases from outside, and the state disagrees with that. In conjunction with the state's policies being in conflict with that. Back to board chair. So if you're requiring them to do that, is there some way? Central Elementary principal. There are other options. Yes, yes, yes. Acting superintendent. I think what it is that kids are choosing to play on certain apparatuses that are putting them within close contact for a lengthy period of time, and they have to put their mask on. When they step off the apparatus, they can pull the mask down. I'm so glad you asked that question. It was a perfect question because it clarifies everything. Principal, they can pull it down, clarify. They can go to other structures, they can do other things. Acting superintendent, so they're not forced to wear them. Perfect. Principal of Central Elementary. Right, the kids actually say they like it, especially now it's getting colder. They actually like it because it keeps them warmer. I've spoken to several children, parents, different members of staff. What has just been reiterated to us, the picture painted is that, and I'll see if you agree, they go on the playground, as long as they're not on certain equipment where they couldn't be separated by 3 feet, they don't have to wear a mask. But if they're on those specific apparatuses, because they can't separate, they have to wear a mask. That's what I get out of it. But what I'm telling you is, from everybody I've talked to, nobody's heard of this rule. This rule doesn't exist. The rule is 100% masking outside all the time, no exceptions, unless you're in the first grade. I don't know why there's an exception in the first grade. I could give you a guess. I think it's because the teachers really care and they think it's probably best if the kids don't have a mask on, but that's simply my guess. But what's not my guess is that they're having to wear the mask. This is not true. What I want to know as a parent, as a taxpayer, is why this isn't true. Is this misrepresented to me? Or is there a breakdown somewhere? I think that's an important issue to get to resolve, because that wasn't just stated in an email or anything. That was stated in a public meeting, on camera, to the public, to the board, and to the acting superintendent. So to me, it's very important to get to the bottom of why the picture painted there does not reflect reality. What got me involved in this situation is when I emailed the principal to find out why there was masks being worn outside, because it's my understanding it's not in the policy, all I wanted was to know where it came from and what the basis was. And I got that response. The principal had made the decision herself, and the basis was that she felt like the gist of it is she felt like extra precautions needed to be taken. I believe her that she means that. I believe her that she thinks that extra precautions can be taken, but I also believe there's a procedure for that. If she felt that more precautions needed to be taken, she could have brought that up. We could have had another public meeting, public discourse, public comment. We could have had another public vote. And we could have adjusted the policy accordingly. But as a parent, my position is, since about the third week of school, Central Elementary is not in compliance with its mask guidelines that were approved, which means it's gone on more not in compliance than it has in compliance, because it was only the first 3 weeks, and here we are, it's the beginning of November. So my position that Central Elementary needs to be brought to compliance immediately. That's a minimal request. What I'm asking as a parent is that you follow the rules. We had public discourse. It was voted on by the folks that represent us. And it was established what they were. So I don't even think that's a minimal request. It should be a request that doesn't even have to be made. You got to follow the rules. And in this case, because what we've been presented is so different, I believe as a parent, we need to know why it's different. Why is the picture that's being presented so much different? I want to know what that is. I want to know if it's teachers making the decisions. It could be, maybe the principal said, hey, just do it this way, and the teachers are making their own. I don't know. That's for you guys to figure out. But I think we need to get to the bottom of that. What I can tell you right now is, even if you believe the situation has been addressed, as of today, right now, Central Elementary is still not in compliance with the mask guidelines. My child was not afforded the opportunity to choose whether to wear one or not on the playground, regardless of what they were doing, regardless of apparatus. It's still happening right now. It's not just one class, because I've done my due diligence. I've asked around. I've asked multiple levels. The only folks that I found that don't have to wear it on the playground is the first graders. It's the only exception I found. Everybody else, it's 100% across the board. So what I want is compliance. It's the rules. You guys made the rules. We follow the rules. The reason we have these rules is because in reality, none of us agree. We don't agree, right? These are sensitive issues we don't agree on. How do we find compromise? We follow the rules. If I go to the school, I gotta follow the rules. My child goes to the school, my child has to follow the rules. Everybody else has to follow the rules too.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep going, and then you guys are.
Okay, can you wrap it up in
Yeah, wrap.
another minute or two, please?
Yeah. What I want to leave with is, as a parent, I have trust that the school is going to make decisions that are best for my child. I have trust that the board, the acting superintendent, are going to make decisions that are best for my child. I also have a trust that what is presented in public meeting on behalf of the school, on behalf of the students, is truthful and as accurate as possible. I also trust that it's found out not to be, that the situation will get fixed immediately. So my position is that come tomorrow morning, the beginning of school, at Central Elementary, there is no excuse for them not to be in compliance. There's absolutely no excuse. The rules are established, the rules are known. We need to get in compliance. And then from there, we can address other issues. But I want that school in compliance immediately.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming to our meeting and sharing them with us. Is there anybody else on there that has any communications? Okay, next up is review and approve the board minutes for June 7th and for October 18th.
I'll move approval.
Okay,
I do have a
is there
question.
any corrections for those?
I'm just curious as to why, I mean, last meeting, they did the previous meeting and then something from back.
We're
Summer.
catching up, we're trying to catch up, we're trying to do one and catch up on one
Oh,
each
okay.
year. And this is the last one I think that we have to catch up on, rather than try to do all of them at once.
Is this the end of the
Right,
backlog?
I think so. I will double check it to make sure before the next meeting, but I believe this is the
No,
last
that
one.
explains it, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Alrighty. Is everybody happy with them? Any corrections? Okay, then let's take, Megan? Yes. Yes. Jason Benson?
Yes.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Okay, the meetings have been approved. Under 5A, committees, it came to my attention when I was looking at committee assignments that with George getting off, we had two members that were assigned to the WNESU Budget Committee, George and myself. And so I would like to add Jason McCullough to that in place of George at this time. So I'm appointing James to that committee as a second member from ours. I think that fills it out. I had to look through and make sure that we replace the ones for George.
So do we have a building committee? Is
We
Rockingham
do,
have a building committee?
our budget committee is all of us. All of us take place on the budget committee, all of us take place on the building committee, because we have such a small board, so there's 5 of us. So we're all listed on those.
So are we gonna be able to talk with, during budget season? I wanna be sure to talk to Trish Schulman and.
Well, that would be under the building, so yes, we can set up a meeting so that we can,
Okay.
so that we can do that.
Just to put that in the queue.
I'll make a note that that's what you buy. Usually what happens with the budget is that we have different people come to different meetings so that they can explain what they need on there.
Right.
Or we have several of them come, and so we'll make sure that we have those people come. And you can also do a
Well, you mean like
separate, do you want a
the
separate,
principals?
as a building committee, do you want a separate, we did tours at the beginning of the year before you were on the board, but would you like?
No. I can always run around.
Okay, so just to discuss it with him. Okay, I made a note of that. Any other questions on committee assignments or any of that? Okay. Unfinished business for discussion and action, if any. We'll turn to you, for the update on the crossing guard.
Yeah, so I had, last week I had a meeting with Jim DeBell, Deb Wright, Green Mountain, Traffic, Scott, and I'm going to forget his last name.
Pickup.
Yeah, thank you. Scott Pickup, and from the town and also the chief. And we really brainstormed and tried to talk about like ways to resolve some of the issues. The bigger issue seems to be the afternoon, just with a lot of folks speeding and not adhering to the traffic things. And so we really, we talked about, putting in crosswalks with the lights that come flashing and all that kind of fun stuff, and any changes, that would just make it more visible for drivers. And apparently, what I found out is a 2-year process to make any improvements, because that's a state highway. And so there's a transportational alteration grant, and I could be wrong exactly on that, but there's a year study, and then you have to go through a whole bunch of stuff before it can get approved. So we're going to start working on that because we got to think long term and get some changes in that. In the school zone, it's clearly marked, but the feeling is that there's not a lot of enforcement during that time. There's already stencils on the street. And so what we talked about is really a two-pronged approach maybe three-pronged. So Scott emailed me back later last week or maybe over the weekend. They're going to be, the highway department's going to be putting the speed indicator, they kind of drop it there so you can see what your speed is as you're coming into the school zone. To again alert drivers. There's also going to be a greater police present enforcement in the afternoon. So they're going to be trying to get an officer out there just so they're more visible. We also talked about the possibility of having a car parked there so it's just visible, but not necessarily with an officer when the officers aren't able to be there. And some of it just comes down to monetary and the number of bodies they have. So Scott was going to send me some quotes on some pricing to bring in an off-duty officer for some of it, because knowing that it's an impact to his current department and whatnot. The other piece they're going to we're going to look at doing is a pedestrian awareness campaign. And so I'm going to work with Ms. Kennedy and Ms. Johnson here, but also try and work with the PTAs and PTOs to see what we can do to start building up a campaign of teaching our students the best way, how to use the crosswalks and whatnot. And there's some videos that are already out there. We can incorporate it into some classes. I don't want to just throw something out there. So we want to get together and build a curriculum around it, how we're going to instruct it, what we can do. But we feel that, again, that's the real long-term solution, awareness and teaching our students, and really targeting the elementary students, because the elementary students, while they're not the ones that are having more difficulty crossing, it's more of the middle school age kids. If we can teach them when they're young, and then just continue to support that money when they get up here, that's going to be the long term. And then we need to get a campaign in here and working with our middle schoolers now, because they tend to be the ones who, they're that pre-teenage, right? They think they're invincible and they can do things. So we're working on that. So we're working on a contract with Green Mountain, which my understanding is for the 9 years that they've been working with us, there's never been a contract. So we're working on establishing that contract, and to get what I asked Ms. Wright is if we can get the crossing person out there in the morning to start with. Her company has some concerns, just like I said, about the enforcement in the afternoon and the safety of their own personnel. And so until we could get that final commitment from the town and we knew what was going to be, I wanted to get the morning up and running, and then we can continue to work on the afternoon. So, like I said, some of that just kind of came together over the weekend. So, but I'm feeling that we're going to have someone in place, real fast here.
So what are you doing to cover so children are safe to get across in the afternoon and in the morning before you put somebody in there?
Well, the problem is we've been trying, we're short-staffed everywhere, and getting, we've been trying to see if we can get a paraprofessional even to offer an extra hours just to be out there. The issue is, again, we can only have someone that stands out there with a stop sign and a piece, and my concern would be the exact same concern with Green Mountain. If we have drivers who are not stopping, if I'm putting asking someone to get out there and do it, and by putting another person at their safety at risk. And I think that's the reason why we can't get someone, because they're not feeling. If we did have someone and they didn't want to do it, and they backed off, so,
Yeah, however, if we're not feeling safe putting an adult out there, where does that place our children? That's pretty serious.
yeah, and my understanding, if you know that intersection, right, there's 4 ways to cross, and I guess that's what adds to it also, is that while someone may, you know, the crosswalk closer on the side of of Central, so that crosswalk going across Atkins on that side, so what would that be, the south side of, is typically, even though the Green Mountain person is best, but it's kids crossing at the northern section that then starts to create more of an issue. So this meeting was very helpful for me because to see the complexity of what that crossing is, and like the real need is to eliminate some of those crosswalks, so that you're not having to cross on all 4s, because and directing students exactly how they need to cross. And so that's part of the awareness piece, is to get, if middle schoolers can cross the street here, cross, is this School Street, I apologize.
School Street, if you want them to cross the northern,
No, we want them to cross at the southern side.
the side towards George Street.
Yes. Get them to go down there, then we can control it a lot better, so.
So they would have to cross up here, cross
That's what
School
I'm
Street.
saying, cross
and
School
down
Street,
the-
go down, and then we can get them across. And, you know, I'm at a point that if I need to schedule my own self to be there, then I'll schedule my own self to be there, so.
So have you started awareness for the middle school as far as they're having to cross cross here to the other side of the street and go down?
So we just had a meeting, like, middle last week, and just got some information from Scott over the weekend, so I haven't had a chance to really, we're just starting to formulate what can we do and have those conversations. Ms. Johnson was out there today, so, I mean, that is the next piece, is to get in, and how do we get that information to students?
The school, for the middle
Jen,
school.
did you have a question?
So I just, and I wanted to say, like, when you said, well, we're gonna get the morning first, I know the afternoon is a bigger concern, I'll be honest, I do that route every day. I start at the high school, go to middle school, go to Central, and the morning is worse by far, and here's why.
Okay.
Because kids in the afternoon are released en masse, and they all travel as a big herd, for the most part, right? So there's a lot of kids, and they're very visible. In the mornings, it's probably spread out over a half an hour as kids are crossing. And I've witnessed the same 4th or 5th grader on his bike. And I know in Central, they're taught when you get to a crosswalk, you get off your bike and you walk it. Well, middle schoolers are bulletproof and they think they can ride across. And I've watched him wreck twice because he's kind of rolled out into the intersection and people just kind of blare through and he's had to like correct and fall over his bike. So to me, I was really relieved that there might be a possibility of getting the morning coverage out first, because to me that's way more important, because they are so spread out, little groups, 1 or 2, for about a good half hour. In the afternoon, it's like a thundering herd coming down School Street.
And my information was based on the
Right.
meeting. I haven't witnessed it.
I'm sure it's probably more chaotic for the poor traffic guy trying to get 20 middle schoolers to behave, but as a parent watching the morning, it's just like my heart just wants to like beat out of my chest.
And it sounds like what you're doing is going first, and then,
Yeah.
you know, but we also need to get that afternoon.
Right.
Too,
Yes.
just
The other thing,
State
observation
strategies.
is the middle school kids are programmed now to cross on the north side, by and large. In other words, they come out of the school
Come out of the school and go
and
down the
right down the
street.
street,
Yeah.
yeah. So it'll require retraining to get them to come over to the other side. But I agree, having one crossing lane in that intersection makes a lot of sense.
And there's already middle school teachers that stand right where Cherry Hill, and they could immediately just kind of like, all right, guys, if you're going, you can cross here, because there's bodies there. It's
Yeah.
just no
Yeah.
system yet that you guys are working on.
Except if they're going up Green Street, you're gonna have to.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to do a little bit more logistical issues,
Right.
and I think then, but if kids have to cross, if they cross Atkinson's, and then they have to go north towards the YMCA, that's a much safer
Oh, yeah.
crossing as opposed to
Absolutely.
coming across Atkins.
The School Street extension
Across
is
to
one way.
School Street Extension, and then
Yeah.
across to Atkinson up the other side. Except, so And if they could even go up and down Cherry Hill in that way, if they're on this side of it, would be something. Of course, the accident we had last week for a child was way up the street, towards the north of Atkinson, and then the car that had the accident was south of there, so it is definitely a dangerous street to be aware of. It sounds like you're working on it and have some good.
Yeah, I mean, so my hope is that, and I believe Ms. Johnson will be in tomorrow, is to meet with her and Mr. Farborough and start formulating a plan, because again, I don't want to, I mean, it's, the crossing is closer to Central, but what I've learned is the students that are impacted the most are the middle school age kiddos, and so we need to start here with how, who do we target, how do we target them, and start getting out there. I mean, it's easy to go into a classroom and tell kids and direct kids where to go, but the longer piece also is just how do we get them.
So if you need support from the board with any of those requests, as far as letters or anything else, you will let us know.
Yeah, and
Okay.
one of the things we're also looking to do is, and we talked about this, awareness campaign is also getting, meeting with parents, but also Scott said he would make himself available to come and explain some of the complexities here of why things take so long. Like you think, like, why can't we just put a stop sign, not a big blinking stop sign out there? And it's like, makes sense to me, but bureaucracy.
Okay. Jason, did you have any questions?
No, I think it's pretty well covered.
Okay. Then the next thing on the agenda is the state guideline updates, which I know have changed in basically in keeping students safe. Would you also like to address those?
Yeah, so the latest updates came out on the 26th, I believe.
That's the one I have.
A new pediatric flow chart came out to work with some, how to kind of figure out, do you need to quarantine people, or are they, so basically, are they close contact? Yes, go here, type of thing. So we use that extensively as we kind of go through things and try and make the decisions that we have to make. And so basically, the other piece was that they are recommending masks should be required in school until January 18th, 2022. And that basically they say to allow, schools should require universal masking for all students and staff when indoors until January 18, 2022. Currently, all Vermonters aged 12 and older are eligible for vaccine. After January 18, 2022, masks should no longer be required for all those eligible for vaccination when the vaccination rate, 2 doses of the 2-dose vaccine, among students is equal to or greater than 80% of the school's currently eligible population. So essentially we know, if I'm reading that, we know that our vaccination rates for our faculty are above the 80%. We need to get the students above 80%. So that we can take away the masks mandate. Included in there, that masks can be removed for, when needed for instructional or operational periods. So the things we know, let's see, masks are currently required in all buses per federal regulations. Masks should not be required outdoors, and guidance will be updated when vaccine eligibility expands. And then it continues on with the surveillance testing will be offered. Schools should continue to participate in contact tracing. But as we heard, we also have gotten updates earlier that you don't need to do contact tracing when it's been outside, and there's been less, there's less chance of exposure.
Right.
And the buses have changed also.
Which was our concern from our parent tonight, so that
Correct.
probably needs to be addressed.
I've already begun addressing that.
I'm sure.
The bus, where it used to be, if Flora and I are sitting on a seat together, right, we had to do the seats in front and the seats in back and one over. Now it's just us for contact tracing. So that helps out quite a bit because we already have seating charts on buses and whatnot. So we're able to do that. So that is the latest health update. We are working, just while we're on it, because it has to do with health, we are working with all the other superintendents in the region, but also with the athletic director here at the middle school and at the high school with winter sports guidance. You know that's coming. So we're working towards some consistency amongst the region, because that helps. But also looking at, we know our buildings, we know our population, and what is going to work. What seems to be consistent across the region is no visiting fans. And then what we're also looking at doing, or we're trying to figure out, is the capacity of the gymnasium. And once the players are in the gymnasium, that reduces the capacity. And so therefore, how many, what's a reasonable amount of spectators that we can let into? Is it two parents? Was it family of four type of stuff? And how do we control that? So we're working on that piece of it.
Can I ask you one question on that? On the no visiting fans, does that mean restricted just to the families of the players, or does that mean
no visiting channels
from other schools?
From other schools.
From other schools, so the local ones could.
Right. So that's what we're working on.
That's what I'm
yeah.
asking.
So let me clarify that. So when I say no visiting fans, that means no fans from the visiting team. And then what we're trying to figure out is what can we safely accommodate for our home fans. So is it two parents or two guardians? Is it four? Based on, again, the size and what we can space people out on. So that is the one consistency that the region kind of figured out. Most people around us are pretty much in the same area. Masking is a requirement anyway, being indoors, so masks during competitions, and then the other one is basically come, arrive, play, leave, which was in place last year also. So there's no like hanging out and getting home and trying to get warmed up.
Are there any questions from the board members? I have one, and it's only because it was something I heard on the news, and I don't know whether it's part of the recommendation actually, or just something that was put out there. But my question is, I had heard that that anyone that was not vaccinated was not going to be allowed to go to another school to play, or play during any of the time that another school was there. They could play within their own school, but not with another team, in contact with other teams.
I have not seen anything official from the state. In fact, the guidance we got from the state was that they were going to be less hands-on, less oversight, and allow regions to kind of discuss that, so that they. I don't have Mr. French's latest one on winter sports in front of me, but it was going to be much kind of like, here's our basic guidance, and you can kind of let me know. I've spoken with one superintendent who believes that their students need to be 100% vaccinated. They shared their policy or procedure with us, with all the other superintendents. I mocked it up and sent it out to our folks to say, like, is this something we want to go down? It was in an area that we really felt that we could go down. But it was the only requirement was for that school to be vaccinated, and all the superintendents asked that question, does that mean if we're not 100% vaccinated, we can't play you? And they said no. That it's just for their students, and that's what that community wants to have. The bigger issue may be around masking, is if our players refuse to wear a mask, that the other schools may choose to forfeit against us. So masking is actually more of a concern than the vaccination.
And of course, in the middle school, we've got kids playing on sports teams. Some of them right now cannot be vaccinated, although that could be approved as early as Wednesday.
My understanding was it was approved Friday, but I was pretty busy Friday, so.
The FDC was approved, but the
Was that it?
CDC,
Okay, sorry,
the CDC, I think,
So-
as early as this Wednesday.
So, yeah. And we are in discussion about having pediatric vaccination clinics here at the middle school and Central, but we're still trying to work out all the details.
Yeah, I got a robocall on that, so I'm sure.
Right.
And you're getting information on that, right?
Yes, so I mean,
Informational meeting.
what I can say is that we are scheduled for a pediatric vaccination clinic on November 9th. And that's for the middle school and for Central. Of course, this is all pending if it's approved. So I don't know. So that's why we haven't put a ton of information on. On November 4th, they will be opening up the link for parents to go on and sign consents ahead of time. And so that hasn't opened yet, so we haven't sent that out. We are doing an informational meeting that we'll be sending out to parents with a link on this Thursday. We'll have folks from the Department of Health and our nurses, but also other representatives from the Department of Health be there to answer questions of those people. The plan right now is that I guess we'll be practicing how to walk across, because the plan is that we're going to use Central Elementary, given some of the logistics of just trying to do two clinics at once. It just isn't feasible. And so set up at Central, and in the morning, those middle schoolers whose parents have consented will be escorted down to Central. If it's not good weather, we'll have buses, but otherwise we're going to practice our how to cross with Atkinson Street. And so I've forgotten that piece. So anyway, no, we'll be walking down there. And then the way the clinic works is it's only the students of the building, so only middle school age students who, again, have pre-approved consent, would get their first dose, and then they would come back to school. They would bring them back to school and finish off their day. And then we would do the students who were, again, parents consented, we would do the kids from Central in the afternoon. We figured that would be flow-wise a little better than trying to have the middle schoolers come down in the afternoon and whatnot. So, and then what that also does allow us is the second dose is in mid-December. I don't have the date right on the top of my head. Maybe the 13th, December 13th would be the second dose. And then
It's not 3 weeks later.
I don't want to quote the date. I think it's December 13th, but some of it's when the state can do it, right? So it's like we're not driving this; it's the state, and so but it would allow enough time for our students to be have the 2 doses of vaccination and pretty much the 2 weeks to fully kick in by the time the holidays kick in. So we saw that as a real positive because I was a little worried about the timing and was thinking about trying to kick it down the road a little bit. And the next available date was December 27th for the first dose. So it's real tight, but, everyone felt like we, number one, needed to do it for our students, but number two, logistically, we could handle it.
Yeah, that really addresses the question I had in part. The other part is, our vaccination rate, the statistics you gave us at the last meeting was so low, compared to where my mind was, for the 12 and older. And I'm wondering, are you planning to do, between now and the 9th, are you planning to communicate more with parents to urge them to get their children vaccinated?
Yeah, so the schools have been doing a lot of that first initial list. They did robocalls, and they're going to be sending out some other information today for them.
I saw something from Central today on the.
And then I will be putting out. I was collecting some information and whatnot. So probably tomorrow I'll be putting it out with the Zoom link and other things of that nature to really try and push, getting folks to do it. One of my big concerns there was the short turnaround time and not having enough time to really get a good rah-rah, behind it. Again, people really felt that we could get there and get people there. The state was open to a second clinic at some time in the future. So,
Is this just for 5 to 11-year-olds, or is it for the older ones at all?
No, because these are the pediatric doses.
Okay.
So everything that they're bringing will be the pediatric dose, and it won't be. So there won't be anything for adults. There won't be anything for adult.
Thank you. Any other questions on these issues? Okay. Jason, you are all set too? I think so. Okay. All right, let's go into budget discussion. Laura, would you like? Jason, did you have a question?
No, I think someone dropped off.
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, Laura, did you want to explain?
Ricky is gonna
Share what.
the documents that I gave you guys.
Should get one. And you got it. Okay.
No. No. Wow, it's a tight screen.
Ricky, can Jason see that as well?
Oh, you will in a moment.
Okay.
Pretty sure I can. Right, I'm gonna share this with you.
Jason, would it help if we emailed this to you also?
Yeah, that might be more effective.
All right. Laura's going to shoot
have
it
it
to you
now,
right now.
Are you able to bring it up, Jason, where you are?
She's just saying it.
Bring it up at the place he's at. That's what I asked.
No, I'm able to see the shared screen, so that's fine.
So we're sharing the screen also, so you can see
So he
it.
can see it, good, okay. All right, go ahead, Laura.
Okay, so this is just some preliminary numbers that I just put together according to the information that we provided the SU and the budget meeting that we had last week. So this first document, it just gives you the FY23 proposed budget to the SU. And the second column, which is this rock at the top, that will be the portion of the SU budget that will be assessed to Rockingham. And then the bottom number is, the total amount that will be. So, in comparison to last year, Rockingham will be assessed $96,504.30 less than, previous year. As well, the overall budget for the SU is, down $231,000 compared to previous year. So that's why the assessment is, lower than the other years. Give the next page. So here, you have data from FY '22 and '23. So I just put in the, first portion, the current, preliminary budget for the SU, and, the comparison amount, in numbers of the budget that was assessed in FY '22 to, Rockingham. As you can see, we do have that, food service that, cut down, the amount that they are gonna be assessing. Is because the majority of the portion for the food service is coming from grants.
Is that ESSER?
No, food service has, separate,
Okay, all right.
grants,
That's
that is
fine.
not ESSER, no. So, other adjustment is, transportation as well. We have, a portion that was adjusted.
Before you go, why don't you just go right down the list? What custodial, it goes from 118 to 321.
231.
Yeah, 118 to 231.
Yes.
231 to 118 is.
So 118
Listen, I
is,
don't need, okay, I'm talking the floor.
yes,
Excuse me.
So, we,
the 118,750, that was the FY '22 amount for custodial. The 231,580, that portion that went up for custodial is, the, cost of the building and, different portions of the, SU building that, is an increase in the budget. That's why the amount is higher.
So in custodial, it's not just custodians, it's also the central office space, so it's the rent for the central office space, it would be the oil, the electricity, so all the expenditures for the physical plant. And so that was an increase for when we moved from Cherry Hill over to the new site.
that's quite, I thought it was, I had heard, of course, I was not on the board, but I had heard it was kind of a wash, the rent at the school was roughly the same as the rent, and obviously to heat that building would be a lot, I would think a lot more than what it would cost to heat the central office now, but,
So a portion of the rent for the SU before from the central office used to be covered as well from early ed, because early ed used to share the building with us, so we used to share the rent. Now the SU has 100% the rent amount for the building. And honestly, the cost of this building is not less than the cost of the previous.
No, but we were told it was going to be, and all the figures we
Well,
were
we'll-
given
we'll-
were that it was a lot less.
I'm gonna wanna see, obviously, more detail on that.
Yeah.
And the
we
other
can definitely
question,
provide
the
that.
related question is, if early ed has moved to central, is Rockingham gonna receive rent from early ed?
Really, and it's our responsibility.
Now, wait a minute, if, you follow me here, if early ed was contributing to,
To the SU.
okay, because they were
for the rent
housed
of the
there,
building.
okay, and now they're housed in central, why wouldn't there be,
Because just what Priscilla said, preschool is a responsibility of the districts to provide that preschool, something that the districts have taken on. It's not an SU, it's that, well, it is an SU, but it's also the districts have taken on. The reason they paid rent was because of the facility that was being used was a non-building. And if you want to push it out, if you were to say, superintendent and SU, we're going to put you in our buildings, and we got this space over here, and this space over here, and this space over here, and it's going to cost us this much money because you wouldn't charge the SU rent to put them in your buildings because you own your buildings and you are obligated to support the SU. So therefore you wouldn't charge the SU for using your buildings that way. And in fact, in the building, when I was a principal, I ended up inheriting the superintendent into my building and taking 2 classrooms because the board had made a decision that it wasn't going to pay rent, allow rent to the superintendent to use another facility. So that just, a way of using, buildings, I mean, that type of thing, so.
So the assessment for early ed, which previously included the cost of the rent, will be going down.
Yes.
Should be, but I can't speak to that 100% without digging into the numbers. I understand what you're thinking as well.
Yeah.
We're not paying rent anymore. We paid rent last year, but we do not pay rent this year, so what the difference is. Yes, and it's clear on the chart.
But
Thank you.
if I ask you a question, that's fine, Priscilla, but if I
But
ask
you're
a
supposed to
financial
go, you are
question,
supposed to be asking me the question, it's unclear, that's the way the board works. You ask me the question, okay?
that's not the way I
You
work
talk to
anymore.
me as the board chair, yes, okay? Now let's get this straight.
Well, that's not the way,
Thank you.
I mean, we're in the same
Okay,
room with
okay.
these people. and you're
Yes, I
saying-
understand that, Jakes.
I don't understand.
It's enough.
No, I think it's
It's enough.
ridiculous. I think it's
Please stop.
quite frankly, it's ridiculous.
Please stop. Okay. Where would you go on, please?
Yes, so you see, the, changes, for special ed, it has to do with the, Act 173 and the amount that is being covered as well, I guess it says according to the numbers of students in each of the schools. Early ed, as well, it goes according to, number of students in each of the schools. The physical service, which is administration business office, the adjustment is according the indirect cost that the office gets. And then we do have changes in the superintendent office, that is according changes in the salaries, benefits, and bodies. Now we have
Yeah,
HR.
That doesn't look right.
Yes,
That's a, I mean, 389 last year and 539.
So that's a little bit of a moving of line items. So the Human Resources Department used to live under the Fiscal Services Department, and so it got moved to the superintendents. If you want to break it out that way, I mean, it got moved just in who she's reporting to, so that increased the superintendent's line. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what else is in there, but that was the biggest chunk of things in there.
But we have increase in benefits, and we do have the changes in the bodies as well as changes in salaries and overall as well expenses.
But
I
we're
could
gonna-
provide a detail.
We want to see a lot of
yeah.
detail. of it.
Like I said, this was just something that I put together for you guys to have a preliminary idea as well. We don't have the principals here for them to discuss their lines and everything else. And
Is there ESSER funded positions in that line?
no, nothing ESSER funded. It is included in the SU budget. And the difference between last year's budget and this year's budget, it was previously the nurse for the SU used to be in the SU budget. And the past superintendent asked for her to be moved and put into the schools, but we felt that the nurse should be put in the SU budget because she is an SU nurse and she just goes around. So I moved that again and added to the budget for this upcoming year.
And just while we're looking at this, there has been some discussion with other boards about should we look at consolidating custodial services? Should we look at consolidation of IT services? And, right out of my head, do you remember, Ricky, what the third one was? There were. Okay. So there was the custodial was definitely one of them, and then IT was the other one. Specialist. Oh, and specialists. So like our, thank you, Nikki. Physical education, librarian services, because we've got part-time services at some of our buildings. And so would there be benefit to consolidate these different units at the SU? Of course, that would increase the SU assessment, but but individual buildings would see a decrease in their line item budgets. So like right now, like the librarian, that's central, right? So that would be a decrease from the central budget, but it would be an increase in the SU budget if we were to call it. I have not had the opportunity to look at is there a cost benefit to doing that piece of it.
I think
And we would do it more like a bill back. So it'd be more of a bill back as opposed to an assessment, like an ADM assessment.
So you will look at that though, and
I would say that any increase in the supervisory union budget, as far as a Rockingham resident is concerned, that's not a good thing. Okay, I would be totally against consolidation because you build up more overhead. I think if you look at the cost of education, we don't want to keep increasing the cost of the administration. We want to be very effective with the administration, provide the necessary resources. But we certainly don't want to be building up, well, for example, this move to have somebody be a custodial guy at the superintendent's office, okay, which layers another level of expense. Now, I know it's ESSER funded right now, but to layer another expense on top of Rockingham where we have a custodial chief that covers all three of our buildings would be an increase in our costs. And you'd have to really sell us on the benefits of doing that kind of thing. And so, I think any move, anybody that's ever been in business or done budgets knows that you don't build up the infrastructure. We want to keep our resources directed at our kids and the education of our kids. So anyway, just as a preamble, that consolidation talk that doesn't result in savings to the towns would absolutely be opposed.
Right, so you know, I'll just respond real quick.
sure,
So,
absolutely.
I don't disagree with you. I think we need to put the dollars to our kids. That's where the most important use of our funds always is. I think in the sense of something like IT, when we talk about consolidation of IT, right now, when it gets spread out, the ability for IT to respond to an issue, if you've got someone who's just a Rockingham, taking care of Rockingham, we have an issue over what you need that free flow. That's where we're looking at.
Yeah,
We're looking at some of
agree with
those abilities and stuff like that. It's
that.
also.
I thought it was centralized.
It is to
IT
some degree, but I think some of the budgeting of supplies and stuff, but you can speak to that. I don't mean to throw you on the spot here.
No, it's all good. We operate the best we can without being officially consolidated, but it does get really difficult when it comes to supply purchasing. So no, we're not consolidated. Every school's got their own little budget, their own little slice of a person. It'd be really effective if it was consolidated, though.
Okay, I've got to learn more about it.
So I was using that as an example.
Yeah.
I think also the piece with the director of operations, that focus is on, because the ESSER grants have so much with infrastructure,
Absolutely.
that the amount of time that if you took, Rick Schumann and asked him to now focus on that, that's going to take a lot of focus off the day-to-day maintenance piece. We had a discussion even at the elementary board last week, same kind of thing, right? They've got a boiler issue there. And it's not Jim Dell's responsibility or purview to come in and take over all the boiler, how you do it and all that stuff. That's Wade's job, right? Like, that's what he's got to do. We want Jim Dell just to be in there to kind of help whatever support that Wade may need right now, and could we apply any ESSER monies to
No,
that
that makes
to
sense.
put a savings, right? So that's where it gets a little complex. It was built real fast. I mean, that position was built real fast, and so we're trying to figure it out as we're building the plane as we go, as we fly, which is always a challenge.
Yeah, the ESSER certainly is a whole different,
So,
And it is good probably right at this moment to have an oversight person, but whether we will need them once the ESSER funds are expended and
exactly, and that's,
gotten to that point of feeling, comfortable with it, it may be going back to what we had before.
Yeah.
So it's just something to consider. So you had some good points there, Jim, thank you. Do you have other questions?
I'm trying to add these, over on the overall budget thing. I mean, it shows a huge increase in,
That's the last page?
middle school, but
Yeah, so, the overall budget here in the last page, I did put there, everything that the, principals were asking for in the ideal world. As you can see, you have, for the middle school, so salaries were, with the salaries increase, and that was negotiated, that's not anything that we could adjust. Benefit-wise, the benefits, we do have, confirmation that they're up almost a 6%, so that's what we calculated, which, it was a little cut down, because they have mentioned before for us to calculate 10%, so at least it's a 4% down. But you see has, miscellaneous, she's
that's,
put down, the new piano, air conditioning, roofing, parking, building maintenance system, the promo, sprinkler. These are all
These are
things
the-
that she just put that is needed. That doesn't mean we're gonna get it like in just one budget in. So that's why it's just preliminary until we just meet again with the, principals, and then we'll make adjustments.
and I think just like looking at the building management system, that's exactly where we were looking at Jim DeBell, kind of taking that lead, working with Ricky, because when you have the individual buildings are all looking at different management systems, if the middle school or Rockingham chooses, building management system A, and then Westminster chooses building management system B, because they like the guy or they like the company or the colors, and then Grafton chooses C, and then the high school takes E, someone's got to support that whole thing. And so consolidating those kind of buying pieces, and I think that's what Rick was talking about also, just as the purchasing power of what works, what one system works for the whole school, for the whole SU. And then can we use ESSER funds to do all that? So as we go through this, that's where you'll start to see that miscellaneous will start coming down, because we're going to be looking at can we apply ESSER to those different things.
Well, the one that stands out to me is that air conditioning.
Correct.
It's on there because we're looking at that under ESSER funds.
Yes, we're having a robust discussion about split units and.
Yes, Megan, go ahead.
So my only question, and I think it's fantastic that food service found grants to sustain, but are these, sorry, swallowing my master. Are these sustainable? Are they gonna continue, or are we gonna kind of have a whiplash in 2 years because they're gonna need to return to previous levels?
So there's no ESSER funds involved in food services.
Right.
One of the things that Harley is committed to is he is self-sustaining. So he acknowledges there's that $180,000 that needs to, that's the commitment piece, but it actually costs him about $2 million to run his program, and he makes all of that money. So he's looking at it as a business, and because I had this conversation with him,
Right.
I'm used to food services running in the negative, and boards having to supplement the food services program. Harley's the other way, he runs in the positive, and he does it because he hires good cooks. He hires people that are committed to not just be food service people, but nutrition experts. He considers them part of the curriculum of our buildings. they use a farm to school program, so they're buying local, and there's grants that allow that to happen. So that's how we're able to do that. The state subsidizes that piece of it. And so he's got, and then what he's doing is he's providing meals to organizations outside of our organization. And that's how he's able to sustain this. If he wasn't putting out a superior product, yeah, he wouldn't be doing it.
I'm Harley's biggest fan. It's just as someone who lives and dies by grants, the first thing my board would say, like, this is great, but are we gonna feel it in 2 years if the grant dries up and you can't replace it?
Yeah,
That's
so
all I meant by that.
but I understand that concern.
But, you know, there's a business aspect to it and a product, I mean.
And I think he's just as worried as, you know, in the sense of, you know, right now, everybody eats for free, right? And he's still able to turn out a tremendous amount of meals and the quality, and he's able to still sustain a profit.
Because looking at it, it looks great down here, it's fantastic. But it's all from basically one line.
On one line,
And
yeah.
so that's just, you know, and it's not a negative at all, it's just as a board member, like, okay, well, let's hope it can sustain, and it's a great talk we'll have in a year or two if it doesn't. I mean, we'll
We
fix
could
it.
always bring Harley as well, so he could just speak maybe a little bit more about his program.
I'm
That's all right.
That would be
I'm the
really
biggest
good.
fan of what they do and
If
believe
he's
in
in
it.
for 180, that's
Yeah.
fine. It's all these other ones.
Yeah,
You know, like-
thank you.
I
Like
think
we're
we
saying
all,
that, you said, for example, the HR moved from financial services to the superintendent, so HR goes down by 40,000, and the superintendent's office goes up by 150,000. So that's not good, okay, I mean, that's really not good. The custodial goes up from 118 to 231 because of this other stuff, and the early ed stays the same, okay? So I mean, you know, if we were previously paying part of the rent, and now we're housing them so we don't have to pay rent, then obviously we ought to realize that benefit. And I think if it could get to allocations, and I know I spoke to Flora about allocations, that if, for example, we have an early ed center in Grafton, and we have one in Westminster, and we have one in Dulles Falls, and the Dulles Falls one isn't paying rent, but the other two are paying rent, and you're taking the total budget for early ed and allocating it based on the number of kids, then obviously we're picking up, we're contributing to a reduced cost, but we're picking up the rest of the people's costs. So I think, you know, I would urge the superintendent and financial manager to really look at some of these allocations. I know we talked a little bit about transportation allocation the other day.
And I
So
think to
that-
see.
Because I mean, let's face it, I'm here, I represent the children, and I don't care if the children are in Rockingham or Westminster or Athens or Grafton. I care about all the kids. But I care about the taxpayers of Rockingham next. And I want to be sure that we're getting the right piece of the pie on these various things that have to be allocated. Obviously, they have to be allocated. But it looks here, like you said, as my fellow member pointed out here, this small drop is basically made up entirely of this food service change, and everything else has gone up. I mean, school board is up by 24,000. Did the boards give themselves a raise?
Well, the boards do have the contract with Back to Be that they did not have before. So according to that, that is an add-on on
Oh,
the
I see.
expenses.
Contract with what?
Back to Be,
Oh,
like
okay.
before Back to Be wasn't used, so the increase that you see on the board is part of Back to Be. Is part as well as legal services and as well audit. So the auditor's contract, they did go up.
So you guys have all the answers, it's just right now we're presented with an overview, right? So
Well, it was an overview,
Yeah.
because
this was actually like the SU, but I couldn't go into more details, and, you know, it's like, right now we're discussing as well, you know, things that we have for the schools, and we don't have principals.
Right, no, I totally get it.
So,
I appreciate this, Laura. Thank you.
but we could go into more details as well. So we do have in the miscellaneous line, if you see, we have, for Central, her miscellaneous is like the alarm and different things that she needs. For Saxon River, she most likely did, her miscellaneous is almost the same as previous year. It was like a couple of dollars up. It wasn't a big increase for Saxon's River. So it was just most likely supplies that she needs and things like that. That's why I didn't put anything to the description. Her bottom line, the increase actually is salaries and benefits.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons you see a big jump, if you go back to Central on that miscellaneous line, is there was a lot cut out last year that maybe shouldn't even have been cut out. Things like fire alarm inspections and stuff like that, the line, because there was an arbitrary cut 1.5%, and so a lot got cut out that needs to be in there to sustain. So we need to dig in there a little bit more and look at that, but, you know, so you're going to see an increase in that line, because when you went from 213 to 198, there were things in there that probably should not have been cut out. That we need to look at a little harder.
Then the overall budget and your miscellaneous for the schools, that is your bond. I guess you guys don't know, that is actually $848,000. So that is 90%
That's
of
under
that
the
portion.
assessment, that's under the assessment, isn't it?
Nope, it's on the overall budget. If you see here that last box, you have middle school, Central, Saxon, and miscellaneous.
Yeah.
That miscellaneous line is gonna be your bond, the contingency fund, and tuition to the private school, and your overall insurance for all the schools, which is BizFit. That 1.2 that you have there, that's what is included in there.
So I guess what I would ask is for some helpful direction of, so are we looking to try and have come in under budget, come in a flat budget, or then what are the principles?
So we know where to go.
I think probably the board members would like you to try to come in under, with the recognition that we want to make sure that the schools have what they need to be able to operate. Because you can't go under to the point where you cannot operate and provide for your students. We obviously can't do a Cadillac school, but we should be able to provide for a good education that makes our students into good community members in the future. And so we recognize as a board that I believe that there are some things that we're going to need to be able to do that. But there are also, like you said, if this is the wish list, there are some things that people can.
Yeah, so I believe the biggest challenge that we have right now, we still working on salary negotiations, so this might go up, salary line. Benefit lines, I don't expect for it to move, because I just already took into accountability the amounts for that. But right there, if we do have any changes in salaries, that is gonna impact each of the schools. So it will be good for us to have an idea, like expectation, so that way we know how much we should just adjust. Because that will be the biggest challenge, is, knowing, how much the salaries are gonna fluctuate. Going by that, we know already what we could adjust, but,
hopefully we have salary negotiations, ending before we finalize budget, so that way we know already how much we can adjust.
I think this, I know in looking through the material that you both provided last time on the overview, I think there's I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 positions that I think we should be talking about, whether we need them or why we have them. And I know the obvious one that we did talk about was the low census in the 2nd or 3rd grade, where, you know, if you had, I think there were a total of 30 children between Central and Saxon's River, so you know, it would be potential to have, instead of three classes of 10, 2 classes of 15, which would be well within the numbers. I thought I saw in the middle school there was like 2 art teachers. I don't know.
I'm not sure what percentage that was.
So I think there's a few questions.
We can look into
but
that,
we'll get into that with.
As well, we have, you know, maybe instead of, you know, that will be positions that would go, or teachers that could be relocated, because we are short-staffed, it's like we're overstaffed or fully staffed. But yeah, that definitely could be maybe teachers move around, but that wouldn't definitely make an impact in cutting down any salaries or anything.
No. Well, I mean,
there is a need in each of the schools, how they actually present it, and consolidating sometimes right now classrooms is a huge challenge due to COVID. You know, you want to keep that distance between the kids, you know, especially the early ed kids, because you just want to be sure that there's that spacing. So merging classes and, you know, but hopefully next year will be a better year, right?
Well,
merge them all together.
What I'm saying is that if you guys don't have those discussions with the principals, then those are the discussions we're going to have when we talk to each principal about their.
Yep, no, as I said,
Yeah.
we have planned meetings with the principals to have discussions.
Right. And I think it's good that you meet with them ahead of time and before us.
Okay, I'd like to call on the other board members too, to see if they have some questions here or some comments on what we've been doing. Jason, why don't I start with you?
Well, I'm just wrapping my head around all these numbers here. My one question is the special ed line. Why did that increase so much from last year to this year?
May I answer that question? So the line didn't, Jason, the line didn't necessarily increase, but what decreased was the amount of return we'll get from state grants. Because we are moving into the Act 173 block grant. So we're no longer, this year, we're not receiving the reimbursement grant that we have received in previous years. The block grant is it's based on our census of our own students, not the state census. So it came in fairly flat. When I used to look at the numbers real closely on that, and as they move more to a state ADM, then the numbers we're going to see a bigger hit or less grant funding coming from the state for special education. The weighting study also has a big impact on that, along with the ELL. But for the special education, that's the main reason why that line is larger this year.
Yeah, so right now, according to the information that the state provided to us, they are cutting us down $110,000 in special ed helps. So that right there is that impact that special ed is having. 110,112. That's the overall amount.
And I believe the overall special education budget is down from last year. I don't remember that. No.
No, it's slightly up, I apologize.
Well, it's slightly up, but technically, it's up $50,000, which that includes, benefits went up and, salaries went up as well. So if you compare between the salaries and benefits going up, the overall miscellaneous expenses and everything for special ed didn't go up. And we did had $110,000 cut down.
Is that because of the head count? Is that primarily because of the number of kids?
So where's the head count? Benefits.
The 110,000?
So it's based, what they did was they based it on, I don't have the total verbiage right in front of me, so I'm gonna go off memory, so I apologize. But it was based on a 3-year average, the past 3 years, and I believe, I can't remember if they skipped last year or
I
included
think they
last year.
skipped last year.
And so so it's not your special ed population average, it's your total student body population. So as our enrollment goes down and our special ed population goes up, we have a higher cost to support kids. We're not bringing in more money.
Yeah, they
So if
did
we could
share
get our
the
whole,
sheet.
so if our whole ADM went up for, for the entire SU, then raise up the amount of money. And the irony is we are actually up this year, I believe, a few kids, because folks moved into the area because of COVID, right? And if they're not using this year, they're using the past years really bad.
So it says that what they used was, they weighted the economical disadvantage of students, the English language learners, secondary level students of Vermont. And according to that, and the calculating the equalized pupils, that's how they came up with the formula.
So obviously this political discussion over the weighting of special ed students is kind of critical in the future toward the amount of money we receive from the state.
And it's not just weighting of special ed students, it's weighting of our English language learner students, it's our weighting of our social disadvantaged students.
Yeah.
And that's actually a big chunk of it also. So it is an important discussion and needs to, I think it's something we need to do.
Because I think what I'm hoping is that the public will get the right picture here, if it's based on if the number's down because the total population is down, okay, then somebody's not going to say, well, gee, that's a foul, okay, necessarily, I think. It's just that the fact is that the numbers are down. But if it's because you're saying, well, we're not going to recognize the fact that it costs more to educate special ed kids, then that's a problem. I mean, and that's the kind of communication I hope we can have with the public so that we can get them on board to support the work of hopefully of the legislature when they address these weighting numbers.
Jason, did you have other questions?
No, Andy answered that pretty well. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Laura, did you have anything else you wanted to share with us tonight? Or? No, I'm good, thank you.
When
Are you set?
the
Jason?
budget committee,
Pardon?
the WNESU budget committee, when do they meet?
It hasn't been set yet.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we're down to, are we gonna need an executive session?
Yes, I did get some information that I'd like to share with you guys
So-
regarding an employee.
Okay, so let's do director's comments first. Jason?
I don't have too much to say tonight. Thank you.
Megan?
Yeah, so mine is just kind of what I should have said last year, but I didn't say until April, just so I want, see what I'm asking. I want Andy to understand, just, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but just for me, when it comes to budget, and when we ask these questions, and we're kind of like, not that you guys don't already know it, but in my mind, I feel like students feel the brunt of this, no matter how we do it. So if the school gets what they need, that's wonderful, right? The students prosper, but their parents and the families are the ones that are gonna feel it, because when taxes go up, rents go up, and I know you know this, but our working families are getting beaten up right now, even in our schools, because we have so many shift workers that have to quarantine, that don't have PTO. We have no daycare really to speak of, extra slots in town for people trying to get back into the workforce, so I don't like numbers. I don't. I like to exist in a world where everything just works itself out. So I just want you to understand that when I'm squishy and I want to understand this, it's because my day job, I get people coming in crisis because they can't afford their rent. And so I know that's what happens, right? When our taxes go up, landlords are going to increase the rent and the supports there are going to start to wobble. So that's just so, principals, everybody understands where the board's coming from. It's really from, we all understand the students are gonna take the brunt of it, no matter how we're just trying to mitigate it so it's like at least balanced between the two. So I appreciate budget so much more now that this is my first and a half season through it. Oh my goodness, guys, wow. But thank you for everything. That's it. Chase?
You're all set? Yes, just really appreciate all the work you're doing, and next time we'll look at it a little more specifically, I believe. So as the budget season continues, it will hopefully balance out, and we can make it the best we can for both the students and for the families. I would put a shout out to the high school sports programs this weekend. Field hockey is Wednesday, the finals Wednesday? Tomorrow is the field hockey finals. Semifinals, sorry, thank you. How are you guys? Semifinals, and Friday is our football semifinals at the high school as well.
Are they at high school?
Right?
Yes.
Yes, they're both at the high school.
Okay. No.
Both of
I
those
thought
games.
I heard only if Brattleboro, sorry, I know I'm not supposed to speak.
No, go ahead.
No, I thought I heard only if Brattleboro won and we were playing at home, so, but I might have heard that wrong, so.
And it's supposed to be at home.
It is at home, now I'm checking my calendar, yes.
Thank you. No, you were fine. If there was a mistake that I was putting out to the public, I certainly would want to be corrected, so I appreciate that. Okay, so just everybody stay safe. We're all working together. We're going to get there, both with the vaccine levels, with keeping our students in school, and doing all that we can for all of them. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session. The premature general public knowledge would clearly place an employee that's being discussed at a substantial disadvantage.